It was an ordinary day in New York, and Laura, a young woman in her 30s, was on her way to another long day of work. Her daily life was marked by the city's frantic routine, the crowded subway, the office, her boss's demands. Laura liked the city, but sometimes she felt something was missing, something that would bring more meaning to her life. Since she had moved to New York, her life seemed trapped in an endless cycle of repetition. That morning, something different made her stop. As she passed through Central Park, something shiny caught her eye among the trees. A golden collar was around the neck of a dog, a golden retriever that seemed disoriented. The dog was clearly lost, with sad eyes, yet there was something comforting and noble about its presence. Laura approached slowly, careful not to scare him. The dog didn't hesitate. He came toward her, wagging his tail as if he already knew she was someone willing to help him. Laura knelt down and looked at the collar. There was a tag with his name, Max. Below the name was a phone number, but it seemed too worn to be read. Laura decided to take the dog with her, at least until she could figure out who the owner was. She spent the entire day with Max by her side, taking him to the vet to check for a possible microchip. They spent hours together that day, and something inside her began to change. Max, with his friendly demeanor, seemed to understand Laura more than anyone else ever had. That night, after several attempts to track down Max's owner, Laura received an unexpected call. Max's owner had finally been found. The man on the phone sounded relieved, thanking her repeatedly. Mark, the owner, was eager to reunite with Max and arranged to meet her in the park the next day to pick him up. However, Laura had no idea that this meeting would mark the beginning of something much greater in her life. The simple act of returning a lost dog would turn into an unexpected and profound change. The next day, Laura prepared to meet Max's owner. A mix of anxiety and sadness filled her heart. Although she knew returning Max was the right thing to do, the thought of saying goodbye to the companion who had made her routine so special, even if just for a day, was difficult. She arrived at Central Park at the agreed time and soon spotted a man with a tired appearance but a hopeful look. Mark, a man in his 40s, seemed emotionally worn out. As soon as he saw Max running toward him, his eyes filled with tears. The golden retriever jumped into his arms, wagging his tail with contagious joy. Mark looked at Laura with genuine gratitude, something she rarely saw in people. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Max means everything to me. He disappeared 3 days ago, and I thought I'd never see him again." Laura smiled, but she felt a pang of sadness as she realized she was saying goodbye to Max. Mark, noticing her expression, stepped closer and said, "You have no idea how much this means to me. Max is all I have left. My wife passed away a year ago, and he's been my only companion since then." Mark's words deeply moved Laura. She also knew what it was like to lose someone important. She had lost her mother when she was young, and had carried the weight of loneliness ever since, even when surrounded by the crowds of New York. Perhaps that's why she connected so easily with Max. After a brief conversation, Mark offered Laura a financial reward for her gesture, but she politely declined. "The time with Max was reward enough," she replied. However, Mark wasn't ready to give up. "Please, allow me to thank you in some way. If you don't want money, at least accept an invitation to dinner. I'd love to hear more about you and how you found my friend." Reluctant at first, Laura accepted the invitation, not knowing that this dinner would mark the beginning of an unexpected friendship. They arranged to meet the following evening at a cozy restaurant in Greenwich Village. As she prepared for dinner, Laura couldn't stop wondering what else might come from this situation. There was something special about that chance encounter with Max and Mark, something that felt like more than just coincidence. But what she didn't know was that this meeting still held many surprises. As she left her house that evening, Laura felt that something new was beginning to happen in her life. Something that would transform everything she had known up until then. The dinner began light and friendly. Mark and Laura talked about their lives, experiences, and Max's story. Mark, a successful architect, shared how the golden retriever had been a gift from his wife before she passed away. "She always said Max would take care of me when she no longer could," Mark remarked with a sad smile. Laura, in turn, shared how meeting Max had brought her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. The two laughed about funny moments with the dog, but as the evening went on, the conversation grew deeper. Mark revealed the weight he had carried since his wife's death. He was alone, estranged from his family, and had buried himself in work to cope with the pain. Laura could relate. She too had filled her time with work to mask the loneliness. But there, with Mark and Max, she felt a connection she hadn't experienced in years. As the night progressed, something unexpected happened. While they were talking, Mark paused, looked intently at Laura, and said, "You know, meeting you wasn't just a coincidence. I feel like there's something bigger happening here." The tone of his voice shifted, and Laura sensed the atmosphere growing more serious, as if destiny itself were intervening. Mark then revealed something he hadn't mentioned before. He told her that the night before Max disappeared, he had dreamed of his wife. In the dream, she told him that someone important would come into his life, someone who would help him reconnect with the world and start anew. "I know it sounds crazy," Mark said with a shy smile, "but after everything we've been through, I believe you're that person." Laura was surprised. Mark's words touched something deep within her, something she, too, felt but didn't know how to explain. It seemed that they were connected by some invisible force, something that transcended the simple return of a lost dog. But before they could delve deeper into the matter, a tense moment interrupted the night. Max, who had been quietly lying next to Mark, suddenly got up and began barking non-stop. It was as if the dog sensed something that neither of them could see. Mark grew uneasy and looked around, trying to understand what was happening. That's when Laura felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at Max, who was now staring into the darkness, his fur standing on end. Mark tried to calm him, but the dog's behavior only heightened the tension. Something was wrong, and they both felt it. At that moment, a strange sensation filled the air. Laura and Mark exchanged worried glances. What had seemed like a peaceful night of emotional connection was about to take an unexpected turn. Something profound, beyond what they could understand, was happening, and the feeling that their meeting was no mere coincidence grew stronger than ever. What did Max see? And why did that moment feel so full of ominous signs? The tension hung in the air as Laura and Mark tried to understand what had caused Max's sudden agitation. The golden retriever's barking intensified, echoing around them as he stared into the darkness, as if guarding something or someone. Mark, trying to calm the dog, stood up and called his name. But Max seemed unshaken, fixated on whatever was in front of him. It was at that moment that Laura felt a weight on her chest, a strange sensation that something bigger was about to happen. "Maybe it's just a squirrel or some animal," Mark suggested, trying to rationalize the situation. However, Max's behavior indicated that it was something more. When they finally managed to calm the dog down, they both decided to end the dinner and leave the restaurant, walking toward the park where they had first met. As they walked through the quiet streets of New York, the tone of their conversation shifted. Laura began to open up about her life, something she rarely did with others. She told Mark about the struggles she had faced after her mother's death and how, since then, she had emotionally distanced herself. Mark listened intently, and as Laura confided in him, he realized that this one was more than just the person who had returned his dog. She was someone who carried deep scars, just like him. They had found each other, perhaps at the exact moment when they needed support the most. "I feel like I've been living on autopilot for so long," Laura confessed, looking out at the horizon. "Always focused on work, on my obligations, but I never stopped to think about myself, about what truly makes me happy." Mark sighed, understanding exactly what she meant. "Me too," he replied softly. "When I lost my wife, my life lost its meaning. Max was the only thing that kept me going. But now, sitting here with you, talking about all of this, it feels like I'm starting to understand that we're not alone." As they talked, a deep connection began to form between them. Max, now calmer, lay down at Laura's feet, as if he too was part of this moment of healing. Both were dealing with their losses, their pain, and somehow beginning to find comfort in each other. That's when Mark made an important decision. "I know this might sound strange, but have you ever thought about getting a dog?" He smiled, a little nervously. Max has been my strength, and I know he brought something special into your life too. Maybe this is the start of something new for all of us." Laura laughed softly, but her mind began to consider the idea. Although she had never thought about having a pet before, her brief time with Max had changed her perspective. Somehow, he had opened a door to something she hadn't known she needed. Companionship, purpose, maybe even a new kind of love. As New York's lights sparkled around them, Laura realized that her encounter with Max and Mark wasn't just a coincidence. It was a chance to start fresh, to allow something new to blossom in her life, and the feeling that everything was falling into place became irresistible. That casual encounter was transforming into something deeper, something they were only just beginning to understand. Max had done more than just get lost. He had found them. The friendship between Laura and Mark grew naturally and sincerely in the days that followed. They began meeting frequently, always with Max nearby, and each conversation deepened the connection they shared. It was as if both of them were finally finding a new meaning in their lives. One evening, Mark invited Laura for a walk in the park where it had all started. The weather was mild, and the city lights created a welcoming atmosphere. They talked about how much their lives had changed in such a short time, and how unexpected the impact of that simple encounter had been. But as they walked, Mark became pensive. He seemed to want to say something but hesitated. Laura, noticing the silence, stopped and looked at him, curious. "What is it? You seem worried." Mark took a deep breath, gripping Max's leash tightly. "Laura, I've been thinking a lot about all of this, about how you unexpectedly came into my life, about how much you mean to me now." Laura felt her heart race. Something in Mark's voice suggested that an important revelation was coming. "You have no idea how much you've changed my perspective on life," he continued. "I thought my world would always be empty after my wife's death, that I would never find someone who could fill that void." Laura remained silent, absorbing Mark's words. "But meeting you made me realize that life gives us second chances. And you, Laura, are that second chance for me. I know our friendship has been incredibly important, but I want it to be more than that." Mark looked deeply into Laura's eyes, while Max, sitting between them, seemed to sense the importance of the moment. "I want to be with you, Laura," he finally said. "I want us to build something together, not just for us, but for everything we've shared so far. You brought light back into my life, and I don't want to lose that." Laura's heart raced. She didn't know exactly what to say, but Mark's words touched something deep inside her. All the time they had spent together, all the healing they had experienced, was culminating in this moment. Laura smiled, feeling a wave of emotions. "Mark, I feel that too. I also feel like Max brought us together for a greater reason. I never imagined this could happen, but you've changed my life in a way I never expected." They stood there for a moment, in silence. It was as if time had stopped. That park, that dog, those words, everything seemed to fit together perfectly, almost magically. Then Mark slowly approached Laura, took her hands, and with a shy smile said, "I know it might seem fast, but would you be a part of my life? Not just as a friend, but as someone I can truly love." Laura looked at Mark, feeling the warmth of his words. Deep down, she knew this was what she had always been searching for. A genuine connection, a chance to start over. And now, with Mark and Max, it felt like she had finally found it. "Yes," she replied with an emotional smile. "I accept." Max, sensing the emotion in the air, wagged his tail happily and ran around them, as if he were celebrating too. And there, in the middle of the park, under the soft lights of the city, Mark and Laura embraced, with the feeling that a new chapter had begun for both of them. The days that followed were a true transformation for Laura and Mark. What had once been a slowly blossoming friendship was now turning into a deep relationship, filled with trust, love, and new discoveries. They supported each other, finding strength in their vulnerabilities and hope in the future they were building together. Max, the unexpected link that brought them together, also seemed to sense the change. Always by their side, the golden retriever appeared happier than ever, as if he knew he had fulfilled a special mission in their lives. The bond between the three of them grew stronger, and Max's presence made every shared moment even more special. Laura, who had once been consumed by her work and isolated in her own emotions, now felt a renewed joy for life. She began to realize that love, in its many forms, could heal even the deepest wounds. Mark brought light and ease into her life, while Max showed her the importance of trusting the unexpected. One morning, as they walked once again through the park where it had all begun, Mark paused in front of a wooden bench, the very same one where they had sat during their first meeting with Max. He looked at Laura with a sparkle in his eyes and suddenly knelt down before her. Laura's heart raced. She didn't know exactly what to say, but Mark's words touched something deep inside her. All the time they had spent together, all the healing they had experienced, was culminating in this moment. Laura smiled, feeling a wave of emotions. "Mark, I feel that too. I also feel like Max brought us together for a greater reason. I never imagined this could happen, but you've changed my life in a way I never expected." They stood there for a moment, in silence. It was as if time had stopped. That park, that dog, those words, everything seemed to fit together perfectly, almost magically. Then Mark slowly approached Laura, took her hands, and with a shy smile said, "I know it might seem fast, but would you be a part of my life? Not just as a friend, but as someone I can truly love." Laura looked at Mark, feeling the warmth of his words. Deep down, she knew this was what she had always been searching for. A genuine connection, a chance to start over. And now, with Mark and Max, it felt like she had finally found it. "Yes," she replied with an emotional smile. "I accept." Max, sensing the emotion in the air, wagged his tail happily and ran around them, as if he were celebrating too. And there, in the middle of the park, under the soft lights of the city, Mark and Laura embraced, with the feeling that a new chapter had begun for both of them. The days that followed were a true transformation for Laura and Mark. What had once been a slowly blossoming friendship was now turning into a deep relationship, filled with trust, love, and new discoveries. They supported each other, finding strength in their vulnerabilities and hope in the future they were building together. Max, the unexpected link that brought them together, also seemed to sense the change. Always by their side, the golden retriever appeared happier than ever, as if he knew he had fulfilled a special mission in their lives. The bond between the three of them grew stronger, and Max's presence made every shared moment even more special. Laura, who had once been consumed by her work and isolated in her own emotions, now felt a renewed joy for life. She began to realize that love, in its many forms, could heal even the deepest wounds. Mark brought light and ease into her life, while Max showed her the importance of trusting the unexpected. One morning, as they walked once again through the park where it had all begun, Mark paused in front of a wooden bench, the very same one where they had sat during their first meeting with Max. He looked at Laura with a sparkle in his eyes and suddenly knelt down before her.